The price of love. Online romance causes financial disaster resulting in family blowout. It was too much for Margaret to bear. She could not and would not continue rescuing her son. She was furious and devastated that her son sent $12,000 to a woman he met online but had never met in person. And he expects Margaret to pay his bills because now he has no money. But this time Margaret will make sure that he pays the consequences for his thoughtlessness and irresponsibility. This narrative follows Margaret Chen as she confronts her son David about his financial crisis after spending $12,000 on someone he met online. Rather than simply rescuing him, she makes the painful decision to let him face the consequences while still offering emotional support and guidance to find legitimate help. Margaret Murphy sits at her kitchen table, staring at a stack of unpaid bills, credit card statements, overdue notices, and a final rent demand piled before her. Her son, David, paces nervously behind her, trying to explain away the situation. Despite being 32, his sheepish demeanor reminds her of his teenage years. When Margaret questions the $12,000 spent in 3 months, David attempts to justify it by recounting Natasha's supposed needs. Margaret firmly demands he sit down, recalling similar talks about responsibility from his youth. Margaret presses for details about the woman, already aware of the signs: secretive calls, repeated requests for loans, and David's increasing distance from his friends and family. The situation is fraught with pain, but Margaret knows her response will shape the lessons David learns from this experience. "Mom, I know this looks bad," David said, pacing behind her chair. At 32, he still had the ability to look like a sheepish teenager when caught in trouble. But this is different. This is real love. Margaret picked up the top credit card statement. The number at the bottom made her stomach drop. $12,000, David? In 3 months? Natasha needed help with her visa application. And then her grandmother got sick in Ukraine, and David. Margaret's voice cut through his explanation like a blade. "Sit down." He reluctantly took the chair across from her, the same spot where she'd lectured him about homework 20 years ago. "Some things never change. Tell me about this woman," she said, though she already knew where this conversation was headed. She'd seen the warning signs for months: the secretive phone calls, the constant requests for loans, the way he'd grown distant from his friends and family. David's face lit up despite the circumstances. "She's incredible, Mom. She's a model in Kiev, and she's trying to come to America. We've been talking every day for 6 months. She sends me photos, videos, she really loves me." Margaret felt her heart break a little. Not for the money, though $12,000 would have been her entire vacation fund, but for the hope in her son's voice. The same hope she'd heard when he was 8 and insisted that if he just wished hard enough, his father would come back. "Have you met her in person?" "Well, no, but we video chat all the time. She's had some technical difficulties with her camera lately." "David, honey." Margaret reached across the table and took his hand. "When was the last time you actually saw her face during one of these calls?" The question hung in the air. David's confident expression began to crack around the edges. "She's been having problems with her phone. But she's sent me pictures. Pictures anyone can find online." Margaret squeezed his hand gently. "David, I think you know what I'm going to say." "No." He pulled his hand away. "No, you don't understand. This isn't some scam. I know the difference. Natasha is real. She loves me." Margaret stood up and walked to her laptop. A few quick searches later, she turned the screen toward him. "Is this Natasha?" David's face went white. The image showed a professional model's headshot with a completely different name underneath, part of a Romanian modeling agency's website. That can't be right," he whispered. "David, I'm sorry. I truly am." Margaret closed the laptop and returned to her seat. "But you've been talking to someone who's been lying to you from the beginning. The money you sent, it's gone." The silence stretched between them. Margaret watched her son's world crumble in real time, his shoulders sagging as the reality settled in. "I can't pay my rent," he finally said, his voice barely audible. "I can't pay anything. I used my savings, my credit cards. I even borrowed from my 401k. And now you want me to fix it. I don't have anyone else, Mom. I know it's a lot to ask, but..." "It's not a lot to ask, David. It's impossible." Margaret's voice remained steady, though her heart was racing. "I don't have $12,000. Even if I did, paying your bills won't solve the real problem here." David looked up at her, confusion and desperation warring in his expression. "The real problem," Margaret continued, "is that you made these choices. You chose to send money to someone you'd never met. You chose to ignore the warning signs. You chose to borrow against your future because you wanted to believe in something beautiful. So you're just going to let me lose my apartment? Margaret took a deep breath. This was the hardest part of being a parent, knowing when to catch your child and when to let them fall. I'll help you find resources. There are organizations that help people who've been scammed. We can look into financial counseling, maybe speak with your landlord about a payment plan. But David, I won't pay these bills for you. Why not? His voice cracked with frustration. You helped me when I lost my job. You helped me when my car broke down. Because this is different. Those were circumstances beyond your control. This, she gestured at the bills. This was you choosing to believe in something too good to be true, and then choosing to keep believing even when the evidence said otherwise. David stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. I can't believe you're abandoning me like this. I'm not abandoning you. I'm refusing to enable you. Margaret remained seated, her voice calm but firm. If I pay these bills, what happens the next time someone tells you exactly what you want to hear? What happens when you meet another Natasha? There won't be a next time. You said that when you ran up your credit cards buying cryptocurrency. You said that when you invested in your friend's pyramid scheme. You said that when you gave your college fund to that travel company that didn't exist. David's face flushed red. Those were different. No, they weren't. They were all you looking for something: success, love, adventure, and being willing to pay any price to believe it was real. Margaret stood up and walked to her son. Despite everything, she pulled him into a hug. He was stiff at first, then collapsed against her shoulder. I feel so stupid, he whispered. You're not stupid. You're human. Humans want to be loved, and sometimes that makes us vulnerable to people who prey on that need. She pulled back to look at him. But you're also an adult, and adults have to face the consequences of their choices. What am I supposed to do now? You're going to figure it out. You're going to call your landlord, explain the situation, and work out a plan. You're going to contact your credit card companies and see what options they offer. You're going to look for a second job if you need to. And you're going to do it all yourself, because that's how you learn. David pulled away from her, wiping his eyes. And if I can't, if I lose everything? Margaret's heart ached, but she kept her voice steady. Then you'll start over. It won't be easy, but it won't be the end of the world either. People rebuild from worse. I can't believe you're being so cold about this. I'm not being cold, I'm being a mother. Sometimes that means saying no to someone you love more than anything in the world. David stared at her for a long moment, then began gathering up the bills from the table. Fine, I'll figure it out myself. David, no, it's fine. I get it. I'm on my own. He headed for the door, then paused with his hand on the knob. For what it's worth, I really thought she loved me. Margaret felt tears prick her eyes. I know you did, sweetheart. I know you did. After he left, Margaret sat alone in her kitchen, surrounded by the silence he'd left behind. She thought about calling him back, about offering to help with just the rent, about finding some middle ground that would ease both their pain. Instead, she picked up her phone and called her sister. Linda, it's Margaret. I need to talk. Because sometimes being a mother meant breaking your own heart to save your child from a bigger one down the road. And sometimes the most loving thing you could do was let someone you love face the consequences of their choices, even when every instinct screamed at you to make it better. Even when saying no felt like the hardest thing you'd ever done. 3 weeks later, David called her. He'd found a roommate, picked up weekend shifts at a restaurant, and started attending a support group for people who'd been scammed online. His voice was different, older, maybe, but also steadier. I'm still angry at you, he said. I know, but I think I understand why you did it. Margaret smiled, tears streaming down her face. I love you, David. I love you too, Mom. And I'm sorry for all of it. I know you are, sweetheart. I know you are. After they hung up, Margaret sat in her kitchen again, but this time the silence felt different. It felt like hope. After he left, Margaret sat alone in her kitchen, surrounded by the silence he'd left behind. She thought about calling him back, about offering to help with just the rent, about finding some middle ground that would ease both their pain. Instead, she picked up her phone and called her sister. Linda, it's Margaret. I need to talk. Because sometimes being a mother meant breaking your own heart to save your child from a bigger one down the road. And sometimes the most loving thing you could do was let someone you love face the consequences of their choices, even when every instinct screamed at you to make it better. Even when saying no felt like the hardest thing you'd ever done. 3 weeks later, David called her. He'd found a roommate, picked up weekend shifts at a restaurant, and started attending a support group for people who'd been scammed online. His voice was different, older, maybe, but also steadier. "I'm still angry at you," he said. "I know, but I think I understand why you did it." Margaret smiled, tears streaming down her face. "I love you, David. I love you too, Mom. And I'm sorry for all of it. I know you are, sweetheart. I know you are." After they hung up, Margaret sat in her kitchen again, but this time the silence felt different. It felt like hope.